At 6:12 local time, the flight deck is already alive. Steel chains clink once, then fall silent. A deck crewman stops mid-step as a call cuts through the ship-wide network. The voice is short, calm, and impossible to misread. Bridge to CIC. New surface contacts on the radar repeater. 3 returns appear at the edge of the screen. Tight formation, clean movement, high speed, no AIS, no commercial profile, no course change. The U.S. Navy aircraft carrier continues forward, steady and controlled, moving through calm Caribbean waters on the same heading. Wind over the deck is stable. The sea is quiet. On the surface, nothing looks unusual. But the radar tells a different story. 3 surface contacts, bearing 087, range 32 nautical miles, speed increasing. The CIC watch officer studies the tracks. These are not fishing vessels. Their acceleration is too smooth, too coordinated, too intentional. 12 knots becomes 18. 18 becomes 24. Inside the Combat Information Center, the lighting adjusts as operators lean closer to their screens. Radar settings change, tracks sharpen, the returns become clearer, one after another. Steel hulls, military vessels. The next call comes through, lower this time. Recommend condition 3. No one questions it. Across the carrier, the ship shifts posture without panic. Magazines are secured for readiness. Hatches are sealed. Non-essential movement on the flight deck stops. Aircraft already positioned remain exactly where they are. Engines cold. Pilots strapped in, waiting. No sirens, no shouting, just procedure. The 3 approaching vessels hold formation, spreading outward as they close the distance. It is a classic pressure pattern. One moves slightly north, another slides south, while the third stays centered, forcing the carrier group to watch all 3 angles at once. Closest point of approach is projected at under 6 nautical miles if both sides maintain course. The carrier does not change speed. It does not change heading. On the bridge, the captain watches the surface plot without emotion. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. Everyone in the space already understands the situation. Maintain course, he says. Log everything. Long-range optics rotate outward, cameras lock on. High-resolution imagery streams directly into CIC. Every frame is time-stamped, geo-referenced, and archived in real time. The first visual confirmation comes at 28 nautical miles. Gray hulls, military profiles, forward-mounted deck guns uncovered, antennas active. Flag confirmation? The bridge asks. A short pause follows. Then the answer comes back. Visual ID complete. Venezuelan Navy. 3 surface combatants. The words settle over the room, but no one reacts. This is not a surprise. It is a calculation. The Venezuelan ships continue closing in, their wake stretching behind them. Their spacing tightens, then stabilizes. They are not drifting. They are not off course. They are choosing this intersect. Radio channels remain quiet. No bridge-to-bridge calls, no warnings from either side. In this moment, the silence is part of the message. The carrier's escorts, destroyers positioned along the outer screen, begin making subtle adjustments. A small rudder correction here, a slight speed change there. Nothing dramatic, nothing that signals escalation, just enough to shape the space around the carrier. Above the formation, an E-2D Hawkeye circles beyond sight, its radar building the full surface picture with every sweep. Farther out, a P-8 Poseidon listens closely, collecting emissions, radar activity, and every small electronic clue. Inside CIC, an operator leans back slightly. They're tightening formation. Range drops to 21 nautical miles. Through magnified optics, figures are now visible on the Venezuelan decks. Movement near the forward mounts. Helmets, personnel shifting positions. No systems are pointed directly at the carrier yet, but the activity is close enough to be noted. Fire control radar? The captain asks. Negative, CIC replies. Surface search only, low power. That detail matters. It means they are watching, but not committing. Not yet. At 15 nautical miles, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. One Venezuelan ship angles inward, placing itself on a vector that would carry it across the carrier's projected path. Not a collision course, a challenge course. The carrier does not react. No fighters launch. No deck systems swing into motion. No warning lights flash. The message is controlled restraint. But it is restraint backed by overwhelming capability. Every major system aboard the carrier is awake now. Not rushed, not tense, simply ready. CPA now under 4 nautical miles, CIC reports. Time to closest approach, 11 minutes. The captain gives a single nod. Continue recording. Outside, the Caribbean remains calm. From a distance, it could seem like an ordinary morning at sea. Calm water, clear visibility, a carrier moving steadily through the Caribbean. But on the radar scope, 3 Venezuelan warships are still closing. Fast, deliberate, silent. And within minutes, one of them will have to decide whether this remains a controlled standoff or turns into something far more dangerous. At 6:24 local time, the geometry changes. The 3 Venezuelan ships keep coming, but their formation begins to shift. The lead vessel holds its speed. The 2 flankers slide outward by a few hundred yards, widening the arc around the carrier group. It is a deliberate move. They are stretching the carrier's attention, forcing the strike group to manage several bearings at once. Inside the Combat Information Center, no one speaks unless the information matters. Contacts maintaining 26 knots, the Surface Watch reports. Course steady, formation stable. The carrier's escorts respond without a word. On the outer screen, a guided missile destroyer eases 10 degrees to port. Another increases speed by half a knot. Not to close the gap, but to control it. To an untrained eye, the changes might look minor. They are not. This is space control. No warnings are transmitted, no challenges issued. The carrier does not publicly acknowledge the Venezuelan ships in any way. That restraint is deliberate. Radio traffic creates a record. Silence creates leverage. Above the formation, beyond visual range, an E-2D Hawkeye adjusts its orbit. Its radar sweeps across every hull, every wake, every tiny change in speed. Farther out, a P-8 Poseidon flies a steady racetrack pattern at altitude. Its sensors listen, record, and catalog. Every electronic emission from the Venezuelan ships is being collected. Back on the bridge, the captain watches the range continue to fall. His posture does not change, neither does the carrier's course. "Hold flight ops," he says calmly. "No launch." On the flight deck below, deck crew remain locked in place, hands near chains, eyes forward. Pilots sit strapped into their cockpits, visors down, engines cold. This is not hesitation. It is discipline. The Venezuelan lead ship moves closer to the carrier's projected track. Not enough to force an evasive maneuver, just enough to send a message. Inside CIC, a new line appears on the display. "Electronic activity increasing," the EW officer reports. "Surface search radar sweep rate just changed. They're refining us." Not a fire control lock. Not yet, but they are paying close attention. The destroyers on the perimeter answer with posture, not weapons. Their spacing tightens, their angles sharpen. Seen from above, the carrier strike group now looks like a moving fortress, surrounded by overlapping zones of control. Every approach lane is covered. The Venezuelan ships do not slow. At 12 nautical miles, the details become clear through long-range optics. Hull numbers, crew movement. The forward gun on the lead ship remains pointed ahead, but personnel are visible nearby. Helmets on, measured movement. No panic, no celebration, professionals. CPA now under 3 nautical miles if nothing changes, CIC reports. Time to CPA, 8 minutes. The carrier remains steady. A junior officer glances toward the captain, waiting for an order that does not come. The captain knows the doctrine. Pressure must be met with control, not reaction. Every unnecessary move signals uncertainty, and uncertainty is exactly what the other side is searching for. On the Venezuelan ships, antennas shift. A narrow radar sweep brushes across the carrier's escorts. It is logged instantly, tagged, time-stamped, and added to the electronic record. The electronic warfare team does not respond with jamming. Not yet. Silence keeps the collection clean. At 10 nautical miles, the first visible deviation occurs. One Venezuelan flanker edges inward by a few degrees, compressing the formation. The shift is small, but the meaning is clear. The pattern has moved from observation to pressure. Inside CIC, a watch officer exhales slowly. They're testing the line. The response comes immediately but quietly. A destroyer off the carrier's starboard quarter increases speed by 1 knot and slides forward. Its bow now blocks the Venezuelan ship's most favorable intercept angle. No radio call, no visible threat, just steel occupying space. The Venezuelan ship holds course for 30 seconds. Then, almost imperceptibly, it adjusts 2 degrees outward. Not a retreat, a correction. But the pressure continues. At 8 nautical miles, the carrier's long-range cameras zoom in farther. Faces are now visible on the Venezuelan bridge, binoculars raised, eyes fixed on the carrier's island, still no hails, still no warnings. The air remains calm, the sea remains flat, but aboard every ship involved, the tension is absolute. The carrier strike group has not fired, has not threatened, and has not escalated. But it has done something more decisive. It has taken control of the encounter without announcing it. Every possible move by the Venezuelan ships is already being accounted for. Every angle is mapped, every emission recorded, every second logged. The Venezuelan commander now faces a shrinking set of choices, and fewer of them belong to him. In the final minutes before closest approach, one ship will have to decide whether to push closer, or quietly acknowledge that the space ahead is no longer open. At 6:33 local time, the margin disappears. The range drops through 7 nautical miles, then 6. On the surface plot, the symbols draw dangerously close. This is no longer distant maneuvering. At this range, intent matters more than speed. CPA projected under 2 nautical miles, the watch officer says. Time to CPA, 5 minutes. No one repeats it. Everyone hears it. The Venezuelan lead ship adjusts again, 3 degrees to starboard. It is a small change, subtle enough to look incidental, but large enough to matter. The new vector now cuts across the carrier's projected track. Not an outright block, a narrowing corridor. A course designed to leave fewer and fewer safe options. Inside the Combat Information Center, the atmosphere tightens. Surface search radar just went active. High power, the electronic warfare officer reports. They're painting us deliberately now. That crosses a line, not a hostile line. A psychological one. It means they are no longer just observing. They are making their presence known. The carrier does not answer with a radar spike. No countermeasure, no change in speed. On the bridge, the captain watches the Venezuelan hull grow larger in the forward optics. When he speaks, his voice stays level. Launch the helo. On the flight deck, movement resumes at once. Chains come free. The rotor blades of an MH-60R Seahawk begin to turn, slowly at first, then faster, cutting into the still Caribbean air. No weapons are displayed, no doors swing open. Today, the helicopter is not a strike platform. It is a signal. At 6:36, the Seahawk lifts from the deck and moves low over the water, staying beneath the Venezuelan ship's visual horizon until the final moments. Then it climbs just enough to be seen, close enough to be unmistakable. Inside the helicopter, the sensor operator brings the MX-20 turret online. High-definition optics lock onto the Venezuelan lead ship, faces, helmets, engine heat, movement near the forward mount. Everything is recorded. Everything is timestamped. At 5 nautical miles, the Venezuelan ship holds its course. No radio traffic, no flares, no sudden gestures. The Seahawk slides into a parallel track offset to port, holding a deliberate lateral distance. It does not cross the bow. It does not rush the mast. It simply remains inside the Venezuelan crew's field of view. Then the laser comes on. A steady green point appears across the Venezuelan bridge windows. Not a weapon, not a direct threat, but impossible to ignore. It moves slowly, deliberately, never shaking, never rushing. A calm voice follows over the open maritime frequency. Venezuelan naval vessel. This is United States Navy helicopter operating in international waters. Your maneuvering is unsafe. Alter course immediately. The message repeats in Spanish. No response. On the Venezuelan deck, figures begin to shift. One sailor steps back from the forward gun. Another raises binoculars. Someone gestures toward the bridge. Inside CIC aboard the carrier, the range continues to fall. CPA, now 1.8 nautical miles. This is the line. If the Venezuelan ship holds course, the encounter will move from pressure to confrontation. Not because of doctrine, because of physics. Steel cannot negotiate at this distance. The Seahawk holds position. The laser remains steady. The cameras keep rolling. Then, finally, something changes. The Venezuelan ship's wake shortens. Its bow wave softens. Speed bleeds away by a single knot. Then another. 26 knots becomes 23. The course holds for 10 more seconds. Then, almost reluctantly, the bow nudges outward 2 degrees. Not enough to look like retreat, enough to break the intercept geometry. Inside CIC, no one celebrates. Speed decreasing, the surface watch reports. Course adjustment confirmed. The Seahawk circles once, wide and unhurried, maintaining presence. The laser goes dark. The radio stays silent. On the Venezuelan bridge, a sailor briefly raises both hands, palms out. A universal maritime gesture, acknowledgement without words. The helicopter does not answer. It does not need to. At 4 nautical miles, the danger window begins to open again. The carrier's track is no longer directly threatened. The escorts hold their positions, denying any renewed attempt to close. But one Venezuelan ship remains outside the adjustment, still holding speed, still watching. The encounter is not over. It has only reached the moment where intent has been revealed and restraint has been chosen, for now. Because at this distance, everyone understands the truth. The next decision to press forward or disengage will no longer be symbolic, it will be final. At 6:41 local time, the encounter begins to tilt. Not dramatically, not all at once. It shifts the way pressure often does at sea. Quietly, incrementally, and then unmistakably. The Venezuelan lead continues to slow. 23 knots becomes 21. The bow wave flattens. The hull no longer cuts forward with the same purpose. It is still moving, but the commitment is gone. Behind it, the second ship mirrors the change almost immediately. Its wake shortens. Its spacing opens. Only the third vessel holds firm. Inside the Combat Information Center, the surface plot tells the story before anyone says it aloud. 2 contacts easing outward, 1 still holding the line. The formation that had arrived tight and assertive is now uneven. Indecision has entered the picture. The carrier does not react. It does not increase speed. It does not turn into the opening. It does not press the advantage. Because at this stage, control is not about forcing the other side to move. It is about removing their options. The escorts maintain their geometry with surgical precision. One destroyer keeps a blocking angle on the remaining Venezuelan ship. Another stays offset just far enough to close any corridor that might invite renewed pressure. From above, the air picture is complete. The Hawkeye's radar tracks every vessel continuously, reading intent not only through position, but through hesitation, tiny adjustments, fractional throttle changes, small yaw corrections, the quiet movements that reveal uncertainty before words ever do. Every shift is logged. On the Venezuelan ships, antennas continue to move. Radar sweeps remain active, but the pattern has changed. Less confident, less assertive. The carrier's electronic warfare team notices immediately. They're reducing sweep rate, the EW officer reports. Not backing off, but they're thinking. That matters, because thinking slows action. And at sea, slowed action belongs to the side already in control. The MH-60R Seahawk remains airborne, but its posture has changed. It is no longer running parallel. Now it sits higher, farther back, still present but no longer intrusive. Its sensors remain live, its cameras keep recording. It does not need to say anything else. The message has already been delivered. At 7 nautical miles, the 3rd Venezuelan ship finally adjusts. 1 degree, then 2. Not a retreat, but no longer an intercept. The corridor widens just enough to remove the immediate risk. Inside CIC, the watch officer marks the change. Intercept geometry broken. Still, there is no celebration. No visible relief. Silent dominance is not proven by reaction. It is proven by continuation. The carrier strike group proceeds exactly as planned. Same heading, same speed, same posture. The world has not shifted around the Venezuelan ships. They have shifted around it. On the Venezuelan decks, the crew's movement changes. Personnel drift away from the gun mounts. Helmets remain on, but shoulders loosen. Binoculars lower. A few sailors glance toward the Seahawk, then look away. The psychological phase is ending. This is how many dangerous encounters collapse. Not into violence, but into clarity. One side realizes it has pushed as far as it can without entering a situation it cannot control. The carrier offers no acknowledgement of the change. No radio call, no gesture, no declaration of victory, none is needed. At 10 nautical miles, the 3 Venezuelan ships are clearly outside the carrier's immediate maneuver space. Still present, still watching, but no longer shaping the encounter. The escorts subtly widen their screen again, returning to default spacing. The Seahawk begins a slow turn back toward the carrier, never fully turning away until the deck is in sight. Flight operations remain paused, not because of fear, because of discipline. There is no reason to add new variables until the situation is fully resolved. From the bridge, the captain watches the plot settle. For several seconds, he says nothing. Then, quietly, maintain course. The carrier's bow cuts forward through open water, unchanged. Behind it, the Venezuelan ships continue on diverging tracks, each now boxed into a reality they did not control. Their pressure has faded, not because it was met with force, because it was met with certainty. Every decision they made is now recorded. Every hesitation archived. Every signal cataloged. The control shown here is almost invisible to cameras and easy to miss in a headline. But it will matter later. Because the next time these ships meet, or the next time others attempt the same pressure, this geometry will already be remembered. The silence, the restraint, the refusal to be moved. And restraint, when supported by overwhelming capability, does not invite a challenge. It ends 1. At 6:56 local time, the surface picture stabilizes. The 3 Venezuelan warships are still visible on radar, still present, still moving. But the geometry that shaped the encounter is gone. Their tracks no longer converge. Their speeds no longer match. Their formation has broken apart into 3 separate courses, each one avoiding the space it had tried to control only minutes earlier. The carrier strike group does not react. No pursuit, no tightening of the screen, no victory lap. The carrier simply continues on its planned heading, as if the encounter never happened. That is the final message. Inside the Combat Information Center, operators begin closing the loop. Not on the surface plot anymore, but on the data. Every radar sweep from the Venezuelan ships. Every throttle change. Every course correction. Every pause at the edge of the line. The electronic warfare team compiles emissions, frequencies, power levels, timing, and patterns that reveal far more than a confrontation ever could. The intelligence officers say little. They do not need to. This is not raw information anymore. It is finished material. On the flight deck, the MH-60R Seahawk touches down smoothly. Rotor wash fades. Chains snap back into place. The crew steps out without ceremony. No debrief on the deck, no gestures toward the horizon. Just quiet efficiency. The carrier makes no announcement over open channels. It issues no statement. It requests no explanation because explanations belong to the side that lost control of the moment. Below decks, the logs fill in with clean precision. Time-stamped entries record the encounter exactly as it happened, without emotion and without interpretation. 3 Venezuelan naval vessels approached. Carrier maintained course. Escorts controlled geometry. Airborne surveillance deployed. Intercept posture broken. No weapons fired. That is all the record needs to say. But what happened here was not nothing. It was a transfer of leverage. The Venezuelan commanders will carry the memory of this encounter forward. Not as a defeat. They would never call it that. But as a boundary drawn without force, without speeches, and without escalation. They tested the space. The space did not yield. For the carrier strike group, the encounter becomes another data point, another confirmation that presence, when backed by discipline, can change behavior without a single shot. This is the part most people never see. No explosion, no warning shot, no dramatic turn away at full speed, just a steady ship moving forward while everything around it adjusts. That is modern naval dominance, not the ability to destroy, the ability to decide when destruction is unnecessary. As the Venezuelan ships move farther from the carrier's immediate area, flight operations resume. Aircraft taxi, engines spool up, the deck comes back to life. Routine returns. But the encounter is not forgotten. Every sensor aboard the carrier and its escorts has learned something. Every operator has seen how pressure behaves when it meets certainty. Every commander has confirmed that credible restraint can control escalation more effectively than aggression. And for the Venezuelan crews watching the carrier recede into the distance, the lesson is quieter, but sharper. They did not force a change in course. They did not compel a response. They did not dictate the terms. They met a wall that never announced itself. That is what "then this happened" really means. Nothing exploded, nothing burned, no headlines followed, but control shifted. And in the calculus of naval power, that shift can matter more than any exchange of fire. So the question is not whether the carrier should have acted more aggressively. The question is whether aggression would have accomplished anything at all. Out there in open water, 3 warships pressed forward and discovered exactly how far pressure can go when it meets a force that does not need to prove itself. The carrier never slowed, it never turned, and it never needed to.